Hello and welcome to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast number 78. This week, following our review of Season 8's 4th episode, we'll be taking an in-depth look at the Doctor Who showrunner responsible for bringing our favourite show back to television screens across the world. All rise, please, for Russell T Davies.
What's that footstep following? But never passing by. Perhaps they're all just waiting. Perhaps when we're all dead, out they'll come a-slithering from underneath the bed.
Come here, you scrumptious little beauty. A box?
Doctor, what is it?
I've got mail.
This week's feedback comes firstly from Ian Thomas McLean, who said, 8 out of 10, good but too bitty. Thanks for that, Ian, and to a certain degree I do agree with you, but more of that later in the show. Next up was Jeff Waddell. He commented, I think, by far, this was the best Who since it came back in 2005. The best performances, the best direction, and may well be my favourite story in over 50 years of Who. Outstanding. Wow, and very enthusiastic, Jeff. Thank you for your thoughts. Michael Doyle said, I loved it. A truly creepy episode with some great performances. Plus the preview for next week had something in it to make me giddy. In one scene they're showing what appear to be prisoners. They had a Sensorite, a Pteroleptil, a Slitheen, Androvax and the Trickster, Captain John Hart, and for a brief second they showed Absalom Dack. Now I consider him to be canon. Good call, Jeff, and I'd missed that the first time round, but like you I do consider anything included on the TV series to be canonical Doctor Who. I wonder if I should do a show on Absalom Dack now. Andrew Marmot left a very thought-provoking comment. Another great episode, another change of pace from last week, and it was all round fantastic. Neil Gaiman said on Twitter that Peter Capaldi's Doctor feels like he's younger than Matt Smith's Doctor, and I'm starting to agree with this, and I wonder what other people's thoughts are. Thanks for that, Andrew, and as you know I've put that question up on Facebook for people to respond to. But if you have any thoughts on Andrew's question, I'd love to hear from them, either at the usual feedback address or on Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast on Facebook. So that was your reaction to Listen. Now it's time for Theta's Thought. Capaldi's opening dialogue in this episode is not only brilliant but brilliantly delivered. And I'm also loving the TARDIS on the seabed with the force field protecting the Doctor inside while the doors are wide open. The whole irony of what the Doctor is saying in this opening speech, and the very fact that he's saying it to the very creature that he's postulating exists, isn't lost on me. And one of the things that also struck me as I watched this scene was that often in the classic series it was the Doctor's curiosity that landed him in the adventures that he finds himself in, and that's exactly what happens here too. Clara's dinner date with Danny was well played out to begin with. The awkwardness between them was brilliantly portrayed by both actors, but at the point where Danny's military past is brought up again, this scene moves from awkward between the two characters to awkward between the viewer and the plot. We all know Danny was a soldier, and we all know there's more to a soldier than killing, and sadly this scene, like a couple from last week's episode, uses a sledgehammer to crack an egg. Once again we see the epitome of that wonderful line from Into the Dalek.
This is Clara, not my assistant. She's some other word.
I'm his carer.
Yeah, my carer. She can, so I don't have to.
But this time played out in a slightly different way. This time we see the Doctor not caring about Clara's disastrous date, but Clara caring very much about it. But then, could you turn this scene on its head and say that the Doctor really does care and is simply giving Clara something to take her mind off what's happened at the restaurant? I've also got a random question from some of that dialogue. How long has it been for the Doctor since the robots of Sherwood? Clara explicitly asks, how long have you been travelling alone? The atmosphere during the scenes when the Doctor is describing the dream to Clara is expertly portrayed by the three actors in their respective beds, and there were moments throughout that scene when I genuinely found myself holding my breath. Rewatching the scene with the Doctor and Clara after they've left the children's home, it occurs to me that we could be in line for some kind of circular time storyline with Danny. Think about it. The Doctor and Clara go back in time, meet young Rupert and leave him with Dan the Soldier Man. Then the Doctor leaves Rupert with a big old dream about being Dan the Soldier Man. In the present day, Clara meets ex-soldier Danny Pink, who was maybe inspired to become a soldier by a dream he's had as a child. And in the future, the Doctor and Clara meet Orson Pink, who is holding on to a family heirloom, a small broken toy soldier with no gun. Is what we've seen in this episode the point in time where Clara and the Doctor have influenced Danny's life, and, given the scene in the barn, where Clara influences the Doctor's life right from the start? Overall, Listen was a great and incredibly atmospheric story. It'll take some re-watching because it was quite heavy in places, but for me, this was a strong 8 out of 10. And so to our continuing series looking at Doctor Who showrunners and directors. This week we're looking at the executive producer who was primarily responsible for bringing Doctor Who back to our TV screens nearly a decade ago.
Right. Where do you want to start?
The inside's bigger than the outside?
Yes?
It's alien.
Yeah.
Are you alien?
Yes. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Stephen Russell Davies was born on the 27th of April 1963 and was chiefly responsible for the revival of Doctor Who and the creation of its two spin-off series, Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. From 2005 to mid-2009, he was the head writer and executive producer of these shows. His contributions to Doctor Who are formidable. Davies is by far the most prolific writer for the BBC Wales version of Doctor Who, having written more televised stories than any other writer since 1963. Including material written for the Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood, he's written more hours of television set in the Whoniverse than anyone else. However, unless he contributes to Doctor Who after 2009, he will remain second to Robert Holmes in terms of the total number of hours of television written specifically for Doctor Who. Between the broadcast of Midnight in 2008 and the final chapter of The End of Time in 2010, Davies became the only person to have written or co-written 9 consecutive broadcast episodes. And beyond televised Doctor Who, he's also written fictional and non-fictional prose relevant to Doctor Who. As a Welshman himself, his commitment to producing Doctor Who in Wales led to a massive expansion of the television production capacity of Wales. His deliberate inclusion of recognisable Welsh landmarks in Doctor Who has increased tourism in the country. Davies' first major success was the CBBC fantasy adventure serial Dark Season, which contained strong similarities to Doctor Who. Davies was also create another children's supernatural drama series, Century Falls. He created the award-winning original Queer as Folk, which includes several references to Doctor Who, and a supernatural drama for adults, The Second Coming, which starred the future Ninth Doctor Chris Eccleston as a reborn Christ. His first professional involvement in Doctor Who was in 1996, when he wrote the Virgin New Adventures novel Damaged Goods. He went on to write Rose, the debut episode of the 2005 revival, making him the first writer of original licensed spin-off fiction also to write for the official TV series. He later commissioned other colleagues in this area to write for the show, including Mark Gatiss, Robert Sherman, Paul Cornell, Gareth Roberts and Stephen Moffat. As the newly revived franchise flourished, Davies created 2 spin-off series, Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, for which he wrote or co-wrote the debut episodes. However, unlike Doctor Who, his writing involvement in these 2 shows has been minimal. In Doctor Who The Writer's Tale, Davies writes that he was to have written Torchwood episode Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. However, that was eventually written by Chris Chibnall, with Davies providing a pre-credit sequence involving a blowfish driving through Cardiff. Davies was also a contributor to Doctor Who magazine, for which he wrote a regular column in which he often dropped hints about upcoming episodes, usually in the form of random snatches of dialogue or listing words that would appear in the script. With the exception of his work in children's television, RTD has written an openly and proudly gay character in all of his work, and Doctor Who was no exception. He was the first to write about confirmed transsexuality through the character of Cassandra, who openly admits to being born a boy in The End of the World, and confirmed male and female homosexuality in Aliens of London and Gridlock respectively. While Stephen Moffat holds the distinction of being the first writer to write about bisexuality in The Doctor Dances, Russell T Davies created Captain Jack, the first openly omnisexual character in televised Doctor Who. Several episodes of Doctor Who and Torchwood have featured same-sex couples, most notably Torchwood, which of course established a relationship between Jack and Yanto in its 2nd season. In February 2007, Davies and Doctor Who magazine writer Benjamin Cook agreed to exchange emails, with the intention of creating a series of articles for Doctor Who magazine on the creation of select episodes from the then upcoming Series 4. This correspondence soon grew well beyond the confines of the magazine, and in the autumn of 2008 the 512-page Doctor Who The Writer's Tale was published. A second edition featuring some 300 pages of additional material covering production of Davies' final stories for Doctor Who was published in January 2010. It was RTD who came up with the concept of the Torchwood Institute, the Slitheen, the Judoon and the Cult of Skaro. He also established a major piece of backstory, the Last Great Time War, and the resulting destruction of Gallifrey and the Time Lords. Davies also created the Doctor's companions, Rose Tyler, Jack Harkness in conjunction with Stephen Moffat, Martha Jones, Donna Noble and Mickey Smith, as well as several one-off companions. He devised the concepts, formats and regular characters other than Sarah Jane Smith for both Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, and established the idea of producing canonical mini-episodes for special events. And it was Davies who cast Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant as the 9th and 10th Doctors, as well as their associated companions. On his watch, numerous original series characters and enemies have been reintroduced to new audiences. These include the Autons, the Nestine Consciousness, Daleks, Cybermen, Makra, the Master, Sontarans and Davros. The characters he reintroduced included Sarah Jane Smith, K9, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and Joe Grant. The Fifth Doctor also made a return appearance in an episode produced by Davies, and his script for the next Doctor included a sequence incorporating footage of the first 10 Doctors. Although it's been a part of Doctor Who lore since its earliest days, first mentioned in the Aztecs for example, it was during Davies' tenure that the concept of certain events and people being fixed point in times and unalterable was solidified. This concept's important in explaining why events such as the Second World War still occurred in the Whoniverse, though this seems to apply mainly to Earth-based events and not events such as Dalek invasions. On the 20th of May 2008, Davies publicly announced his departure from Doctor Who. He continued as executive producer for the 2009 specials and was also executive producing Series 3 of Torchwood and Series 3 of the Sarah Jane Adventures at the same time. He said that he wouldn't write for Doctor Who again after the 2009 specials. However, at a Q&A session following a preview screening of one of the 2009 Torchwood episodes, Davies indicated that not only was he planning to stay with Torchwood for another decade if needs be, but he hoped to see further crossovers between Torchwood and Doctor Who. His biographical blurb in the Doctor Who Storybook 2010 indicated that Davies would stay on to oversee Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. And indeed he executive produced Torchwood's 4th series, Miracle Day. And he was also executive producer for the 6-part series, Sarah Jane's Alien Files.
Oh, goodbye, my dear chap. I must say I've had the time of my lives.
And that's all for this week. As always, my thanks for tuning in. And if you have any feedback for the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at respectthething@hotmail.com or leave your thoughts and comments on Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast on Facebook. Next week we will of course be reviewing Time Heist, the 5th episode in this season's run, and looking at current showrunner Stephen Moffat. Until then...
This is the Bank of Carol Black Sauce.
Picture the thing you want most in the universe. And decide how badly you want it.
We're actually going to do it. Rob the bank.
If we don't, we die.
We must locate them.
What is that?
I don't know. I hate not knowing.
Are you hungry, boy?
The bank is now open.
Thank you for listening to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all copyright and property of the BBC, and no infringement is intended.